Hi everyone and welcome to lesson number 20. So having finished your assessment piece, writing your letter to an MP on the topic of climate change and what we can do about that, we're now going to slightly shift focus and look at a very specific issue that is related to our topic on climate change, and that is of fast fashion. This is a topic that I feel really passionately about, and hopefully will inspire some of you to think a little bit more ethically about fashion yourselves as well. Okay, I'm just going to move myself out of the way so that you can actually have a look at your task to begin with. So we're going to be focusing as our learning objective today on evaluating and expressing a viewpoint effectively. So it's going to be all about exploring ideas and reactions in today's lesson. So for your starter, I want you to have a look at the image here, this advert that you can see, and I want you to think about what you could analyse in this advert to comment on any aspect of language, image, tone, etc. So I want you to basically write down a couple of key points about how you react to this advert. You can comment on any aspect of it, whether that's the words that you use, the image, or the kind of tone that you think it sets. Okay, so you're working your way through the starter bullet points here. So pause the video and jot down some initial reactions to what you think this advert is about. So those of you that are really using your focus here might have noticed that this is from World Vision, okay, and it says, "Let's end child slavery." Okay, we've got an image of a child who looks as if they're working very hard at sewing with a sale sign below them. Okay, so think about what the message of this advert might be, and then obviously a strapline here: something should never be for sale. What do you think that is referring to? Is it referring to the garment, or is it referring to the child, or both? Okay, right, jot your ideas down. Then, for your next 3 bullet points, some more questions to have to work through. Don't forget to pause the video whilst I keep talking. I'm working at my pace here, so you need to pause the video in order to complete each task at the right time for you. But the second bullet point asks you, what is the genre, audience and purpose? We refer to this as the gap in our previous lessons. So you're looking for what genre this is. Obviously it is a text advert with an image on it too. We've got an audience of who do you believe? Who is it being aimed at? And what do you believe the purpose overall is? What are they aiming to make us think or change our behaviours in relation to? Okay, so you need to write down your answers for genre, audience and purpose for that one. Then your next bullet point, when you're ready, what does it make us feel? So I want you to write in a complete sentence your emotional reaction to this. And then finally, why you feel that you have that reaction to it. Okay, and your title that all of this is going under is fast fashion. Don't worry if you don't know what that means yet, you will do by the end of this lesson. So complete your starter questions, writing in full sentences now, and then pause the video. Okay, so some of the comments you might have made is that it is a fairly emotive advert. You might have said that for bullet point 1 that it's quite a striking advert with a central image that really draws our eye. Looks like the child is working really hard with a huge over-exaggerated sale sign around the child, which indicates that the child himself is for sale rather than the item he is making. Okay, in terms of genre, audience and purpose, it appears to be an awareness campaign about the impact of child labour, children having to work long hours for often very, very little money. And the audience, arguably largely female, but not entirely female. It's all of us. It's any of us that are consuming, buying lots of clothing, whether that's online or in person. All of us are kind of guilty of being sucked in by the fashion world at some point. If you're not, then my respect to you. But most people are guilty of having given in to the kind of pressures of fashion at some point in their lives. And the purpose, to make us question who is behind the manufacturing of our clothing and what conditions have they experienced in order to produce that clothing for us. What does it make us feel? Well, I think the intended purpose and effect is to make you feel guilt and to make you rethink or reflect on the costs involved in buying clothing that go beyond just the money that you put down for an item of clothing, but also the damage that it might be doing to somebody else. And why? Because child labour still exists. Children in some parts of the world are still being forced to work for very little money in often squalid and poor conditions, where they are often mistreated in order to ensure that they are producing enough garments under quite strict time regulations. They often work in very overheated, crowded conditions where they are physically at risk of damaging themselves. They are working, of course, with machines like this that have huge needles, and often the conditions that they're working in don't allow them proper break times either. So they're often working with very little food, very little to drink, in horrible, horrible conditions. So that's the reason this campaign advert exists, is to make us think again about our desire for fast fashion. Fast fashion is our desire to buy more and more items of clothing that we maybe only wear a few times and then throw out. Now, all of that clothing that we try to get rid of goes to landfill, and as a result damages our ecosystems, it damages our environment. A lot of that fabric cannot be easily recycled, and it is therefore lying in landfill sites, mounting up. As part of the work for this video, I've linked to some other videos that are in the playlist on fast fashion. You need to go to my channel, look in the Year 7 Persuasive Writing playlist, and you will see that towards the end of that playlist there are some videos on fast fashion. Please go and watch those as part of this lesson. They will inform you about what fast fashion is, how it operates, and what you need to know in order to be able to go on to do the written tasks about that. So what I'd suggest you do now, once you've completed your starter, is that you pause the video and have a go at completing the watching of the videos that are linked in the playlist on fast fashion. You may wish to make some brief notes, bullet point list, on what you learn about fast fashion in those videos. Okay, so hopefully at this point you have gone away and watched the videos in the playlist. If not, go do that now, then come back to this video and replay from here. Okay, so we're now going to have a look at the headline here. Who made my clothes? Stand up for workers' rights with Fashion Revolution Week. And your challenge is to identify what techniques are being used in that headline, and what effect do they produce. And so I've put some of the key techniques you might want to think about at the bottom here. I suggest you copy out this quote into your book, leave some space around it, and then highlight and label any of the techniques that you can identify. So you can use these to help you identify the methods and techniques used. And you can also think about your fire actions and your logos, ethos and pathos. Which of those do you think are being used there? Pause the video and complete that now. Okay, so hopefully you've had a go at annotating your quote here and identifying and labelling which of the techniques are being used. If you haven't, complete that task now. So one of the most significant techniques used here is the imperative, the command. So stand up for workers' rights. Really important use of that technique there, stand up for workers' rights, because it's commanding you on how it wants you to react to the campaign, to protect those children who are being used for labour, as you saw in the previous image. And we've got the use of the rhetorical question, who made my clothes? It doesn't expect an answer. In fact, it goes on to give you the imperative, almost telling you what you should think, but it's very persuasive. And so we know that both the rhetorical question and the imperative has been used. You could also argue that the use of rights is a really emotive word. It appeals to our sense of emotion about what is right, our rights, our freedoms, what we stand for as humans is to protect those of each other, and therefore that use of rights is a really really emotive use of language. You've also got the alliteration between rights and revolution, which joins those words together and makes us pay attention to the meaning in both of those. And it suggests that it is revolutionary to fight for our rights, and that is somehow important and to be respected. We should all care about it. Okay? So hopefully that's talked you through some of the methods you should have identified there. Okay, so we are now going to read an article on fast fashion, and we're going to think about how it presents the issues of child labour and the damage of fast fashion. So, who made my clothes? Stand up for the workers' rights with Fashion Revolution Week. The link to the article is, as usual, in the description. You can download it there and read it for yourself. So this is by Tamsin Blanchard. Exploited garment workers in Bangladesh are facing arrest and violent attack for demanding more pay. A campaign uniting customers and workers gives you the power to help, says Tamsin Blanchard. Okay, so why do we need a fashion revolution? Because 6 years after the Rana Plaza factory collapse in Bangladesh, which killed 1,338 garment workers, our clothes are still being made by some of the poorest, most overworked and undervalued people in the world. The ruins of the Rana Plaza building in Dhaka, Bangladesh. The building collapsed in 2013, killing more than 1,100 people. And the photograph you can see here of that building's collapse. You can imagine how devastating it was for such a huge number of people to be killed because they were working in such difficult conditions. A report published last week by the Worker Rights Consortium gives a shocking picture of repression, violent attacks and intimidation of garment workers in Bangladesh who are simply trying to campaign for a living wage. Desperate workers, vital cogs in the country's 30 billion, 21 billion in UK pounds industry, have been asked for more money since the minimum wage was raised in November 2018 to the equivalent of £17 a week, less than 35 pence an hour. When you compare that with our minimum wage in this country, that is truly shocking and amazing that anyone could survive on it, really. Since last December, at least 65 workers have been arrested on false charges, while factories producing clothes for some of our favourite brands have fired and blacklisted 11,600 workers with no legal justification. According to the WRC, some have paid with their lives, shot dead by the police as retribution for speaking out. The industry and the government seem to be driven by a desire to maintain control and low prices, regardless of the risks to workers' lives and well-being, says the report. They are clearly betting that Western brands and retailers care a great deal about prices and very little about labour standards. I care, and I want the brands I spend my money with to care too. This is why I will be taking part in Fashion Revolution Week this week to ask, who made my clothes? We are campaigning for an industry where environmental protection as well as human rights are the standard and not the exception, says Carrie Summers, who founded the campaign in the immediate aftermath of the Rana Plaza collapse. She started Fashion Revolution because she, like co-founder Ursula de Castro and many others working in the industry, felt that the disaster had to stand for something. It had to lead to revolutionary change within the fashion industry. Last year, 32.5 million people took part during the week to ask, who made my clothes? That question, when a brand is tagged on social media with the hashtag who made my clothes, has already resulted in major changes within the industry. Marks & Spencer's now publishes its supplier list, along with an interactive map of the factories who produce its food and clothing around the world. The map covers 67 countries and details 1,720 factories employing 994,512 workers. 85 of these are in Bangladesh. Many other brands are now publishing their supplier lists, including ASOS, the H&M Group, including COS, Arket, and other stories, Primark and Levi's. Fashion Revolution has been really successful in terms of giving people easy tools to be curious, find out and do something about it, says Summers. I will be doing just that. The textiles industry accounts for 1.2 billion tonnes of CO2 in 2015. Its use of non-renewable resources, including oil to make synthetic fibres, is estimated to increase from 98 million tonnes in 2015 to 300 tonnes by 2050. Dyeing and textile treatment processes contribute to 20% of the world's industrial water pollution. When the system is killing us, we must change it, said Sarah Arnold, founder of fashion rental company Hire Studio, which is taking part in the Extinction Rebellion protests. The privilege and influence of the fashion industry should be used to force governments to declare emergency and act. Fashion Revolution Week provides the perfect platform to urge brands to put worker welfare and safety and environmental safeguards above shareholder profit. We have to start looking at the true cost of our clothing, because at the moment that is hidden, says Summers. Ultimately, future generations are going to bear the cost of the unseen social and environmental impacts. We all have the power to make a change. This Fashion Revolution Week is all about demanding fair and decent conditions and pay, environmental protection and gender equality. On Wednesday, Fashion Question Time will be at London's Victoria and Albert Museum with a panel of speakers including no idea how to say that, MP, chaired by Baroness Lola Young. Limited tickets are still available here. There are thousands of other events around the world. Get involved. Go to Fashion Revolution's events page. Okay, so that's your article there, and it is clearly talking through some of the awful conditions for workers who produce our fashion brands. And for many of them, the basic expectation of fair pay and safe conditions for work is not being met. And even though this article is now aged, having been printed in April 2019, and over a year down the line, some fashion companies are still arguing that not enough is being done to make it safer and respect the human rights of those who work to produce the clothing. So hopefully what you've got from this is an image of the devastation that fast fashion can cause. And I'm now going to ask you to rate where you would put yourself according to a statement on this. Okay, so here is the statement that I want you to consider. Having read the article, do you agree or disagree with fast fashion? Where do you personally stand with it? Do you think it's fair enough? And if people are willing to work for little money, then why shouldn't they? Or do you believe that we have a basic human rights that should be met by any industry, and that involves fair pay and fair and safe conditions for work? Where do you stand? So you can rate yourself on a scale. You can either write it out between 1 and 5, 5 being totally agree with fast fashion and think it's fair enough, down to 0, totally disagree with fast fashion and think we need to do more to prevent fashion being fast. And then what arguments could be made on both sides? So you're going to need to create a table, arguments for and arguments against fast fashion, and you need to pause the video at this point, use the article, use the videos that I have linked in our Year 7 Persuasive Writing playlist on fast fashion to help you to draw up your information for both sides of the argument. So give that a go now, guys, and pause the video. Okay, so hopefully you have now drawn up your sides of the argument, points for fast fashion and points against. Some of the arguments that you could have had in support of fast fashion is that it is cheap, it enables people who are not necessarily privileged and have lots of money or a high income to still be able to engage in culture and to buy clothing to make themselves feel better about themselves. On the flip side of that, you might be arguing that fast fashion is damaging to the environment, but also damaging to human rights, and it is an abuse of often very innocent poor people like children who end up being exploited by the industry. Okay, now what I'm going to ask you to do is to take all of the information I've given you in this lesson and draw it all together to create a plan for an article about fast fashion. So the article is going to be writing imagine you're writing for a newspaper, arguing for or against fast fashion. So if you want to be really controversial, you can argue that fast fashion is fair enough. If you want to write from the other side of it and defend workers who are being exploited, then you'll be arguing that fast fashion still needs to be addressed and we need to think more ethically about how we buy clothes and how we recycle clothing. Okay, so we're now going to talk about what the difference is between an article and what you did for your last assessment, which was to write a letter. So what is the difference between the two? Have a think now. Okay, so some of the basic differences are kind of outlined here for you. So when you are creating a newspaper or magazine article, the most basic difference is going to be that the format that you lay it out in will look very different. You can see over here we've got the examples of how an article would be laid out in contrast to what you've looked at for your previous lessons for a letter. You do not have to, when you write yours out, create columns like you can see up there. You don't have to do that, but if you wish to, you are welcome to. It is a skill that we will look at next year when you will be writing your own newspaper style articles on crime scenes. So if you can practice that skill now, it will benefit you for next year's units as well. Okay, so key difference: format, the way it looks on the page. You're also much less likely to be writing using the direct address of you. The article that we've just read is much more neutral and objective in the way that it is written, and they're often written in third person rather than using a lot of first person accounts, although the one that we've just read does use first person, and you'd be welcome to do that if you wanted to, but you're not trying to build the relationship that we talked about creating in your letter between you and your MP. It's more about a more neutral, unbiased accounting of the facts as you see them and the evidence as you see it. Okay? So in the same principle of the slide here, it should look fairly familiar to you, as it's designed in the same principle as the one that we use for your assessment. And here I've given you a little bit of a prompt about a title. So one of the key differences between the letter format and the article format is that an article will usually use a catchy title to make the reader want to engage with that particular article and find out what it's about. So your first job will be to try and create a catchy title like Fast Fashion Fix. If you're really stuck for ideas, you are welcome to use that one as your starting point. If you think you can do better, please do come up with your own catchy title. Whatever side of the argument you're coming down on, you want your title to relate to your side of the argument so that the reader immediately knows what your argument is going to be about. Okay, and you've got some key vocab here to help you. If you are ignorant, you don't understand something, or you're ill-informed about something, you probably know sickeningly, so to feel sick as a result of something selfishly. Chastise means to tell off, so you could say, I'm not writing to chastise my readers, I'm writing to better inform them about the horrors of fast fashion. Okay, and you've got some other nice vocab here like damaging, devastating, self-serving. That means it's all about making the person that's written it or produced it feel better about themselves. So you could say that fast fashion appeals to the self-serving fashionistas out there, because you're saying that they're self-obsessed, that they only care about stuff that makes them feel good instead of looking at the damage it's doing. Image obsessed, meaning they're obsessed with how they look, and selfie culture. You can use any of those key vocab words to build into your plan of how you're going to write your article. Today is only about planning it out. You're not going to write up the full thing. And once you've thought about the vocab that you might want to use, you're going to take a look at your ingredients here that I want you to try and build into your writing. And I'm going to ask you now to spend the next 10 minutes planning out phrases or paragraphs that you will use for your article. And you want to work your way through this list to try and include as many of these examples as you can. Okay, so this will be your final activity for this lesson. So you want to try and plan out some phrases embedding some some of this vocabulary and using some of these techniques that you can use to then write up a full article. You can also plan out what each of your paragraphs might be about in your Fast Fashion Fix article, and you're aiming to write about a page in total if you can. So you want to spend now the final part of the lesson planning out an answer to meet these ingredients and vocab, and to think about what you would be arguing about fast fashion. If you're stumped for ideas, go back, watch those videos and the playlist again to get some more inspiration about the kind of arguments you want to make. Okay, so give that a go now, guys, and thank you very much for sitting through another lesson. Again, I really look forward to hearing what you think about all of this and to reading your work. So just plan it out for today, and next lesson we will be developing this and building upon it. Okay, well done everyone.